Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets by J.K. Rowling. An immersive summary. The summer heat pressed down on Privet Drive like a heavy blanket, but nowhere was it more suffocating than in the smallest bedroom of number 4. Harry Potter lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, isolated from everything that mattered to him. The Dursleys had locked away his trunk containing his wand, books and robes, all connections to his true world, under the stairs where he once slept. No letters from Ron or Hermione had arrived, not a single owl in weeks. The silence from the wizarding world cut deeper than any of Uncle Vernon's sneers or Dudley's taunts. One stifling evening, as Harry contemplated another day without word from his friends, a crack disturbed the silence. There, standing on his bed with tennis ball-sized eyes and bat-like ears, appeared a strange creature dressed in what looked like a filthy pillowcase. Dobby the house elf bowed so low his pencil-thin nose nearly touched the worn carpet. The creature wrung his hands anxiously, revealing that he had been intercepting Harry's mail, letters from friends who had indeed been writing. With trembling voice and quivering limbs, Dobby delivered his warning. Harry Potter must not return to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, for terrible danger awaited him there. When Harry refused to promise he would stay away, Dobby's desperation escalated. The house elf darted from the room and down the stairs, his bare feet making little sound. Harry pursued in silent panic, only to freeze in horror as Aunt Petunia's masterpiece pudding, made for Uncle Vernon's important dinner guests, rose into the air. It hovered for one terrible moment, before crashing down in a spectacular mess of cream and sugared violets. The Dursleys' fury was instant and absolute. Harry stood amid the chaos, Dobby vanished, and the evening concluded with an official warning from the Ministry of Magic for underage sorcery, the final humiliation. The punishment came swiftly. Uncle Vernon installed bars across Harry's window, a cat flap in the door for meager food delivery, and a lock that kept him prisoner in his own room. Harry sank onto his bed, more isolated than ever before. Hedwig remained locked in her cage, unable to hunt or deliver messages. The walls seemed to close in with each passing day as Harry contemplated a bleak future, cut off from Hogwarts magic, and the only people who truly cared about him. Outside, the summer continued, but for Harry Potter, trapped behind bars both literal and figurative, time had stopped entirely. In the dead of night, Harry Potter startled awake to an unusual sound, the unmistakable purr of an engine outside his barred window. Peering through the moonlight, he discovered an astonishing sight. An old turquoise Ford Anglia suspended in midair, with Ron Weasley's freckled face grinning from the back seat while his twin brothers, Fred and George, sat in front. The bars were wrenched free with a screech of metal, and Harry hurriedly gathered his possessions, sneaking Hedwig's cage through the window. Just as Uncle Vernon burst into the room with a roar of rage, Harry leapt into the waiting car, his fingertips barely escaping his uncle's desperate grasp as the flying vehicle soared away into the star-filled sky. The burrow emerged from the morning mist like something from a fairy tale, a ramshackle home that defied gravity, with rooms stacked haphazardly upon one another. Inside, magic infused every corner. Self-stirring pots bubbled in the kitchen, a clock with 9 hands showed the whereabouts of each family member, and garden gnomes cursed in tiny voices as they were flung over the fence. Mrs. Weasley's initial fury at her son's unauthorized rescue mission melted into motherly concern as she heaped Harry's plate with sausages and eggs. For the first time, Harry witnessed what wizarding family life truly meant: chaotic, warm and entirely wonderful. His Hogwarts letter arrived with the morning post, bringing news of required textbooks by one Gilderoy Lockhart, causing Mrs. Weasley to flush pink with excitement. The family's trip to Diagon Alley began with Harry's first experience with Floo powder, a dizzying journey through fireplace after fireplace that went horribly wrong. Choking on ash and disoriented, Harry emerged not in the bright shops of Diagon Alley, but in the shadowy interior of Borgin and Burke's, deep within Knockturn Alley. Concealing himself behind a large black cabinet, Harry's heart hammered against his ribs as the shop's bell tinkled and Draco Malfoy strode in, followed by his father, Lucius. Through narrowed eyes, Harry watched as Lucius produced a list of dark artifacts he wished to sell, his cold voice speaking of ministry raids and items that might prove embarrassing if discovered. The revelation sent a chill through Harry's spine that even the summer heat couldn't dispel. Grimy windows obscured the weak daylight as Harry slipped out of the shop, his glasses askew and soot still clinging to his robes. The twisted alleyways of Nocturne Alley closed around him, filled with hunched figures and displays of shrunken heads and poisonous candles. Relief flooded through him at the sight of Hagrid's massive form, parting the crowd like a ship through dark waters. The groundskeeper looked surprised. His big hands led Harry to Diagon Alley. The Weasleys were there, looking around fast, even in the big crowd. You could see their red hair. As Mrs. Weasley brushed soot from his clothes with trembling hands, Harry kept the secret of what he'd overheard locked behind his teeth, the memory of Lucius Malfoy's calculating expression casting a shadow over an otherwise perfect day. The gleaming scarlet Hogwarts Express waited at platform 9 3/4, but when Harry and Ron charged toward the barrier after the Weasley family, they crashed painfully into solid brick. The barrier had sealed itself, leaving them stranded as the clock struck 11. Panic rose in their chests as they contemplated missing the train entirely. Ron's eyes suddenly lit up with a reckless idea. His father's enchanted Ford Anglia sat waiting in the parking lot. With trembling hands, they loaded their trunks and soared into the clouds, the invisibility booster failing as they flew alongside the Hogwarts Express, visible to startled muggles below. Night had fallen by the time Hogwarts Castle appeared on the horizon, its windows glowing against the darkness. The car, exhausted from the journey, began to sputter and lose altitude just as they approached the school grounds. Ron wrestled with the steering wheel as they plummeted toward the ancient stone walls, narrowly missing the astronomy tower before crashing spectacularly into the branches of an enormous willow tree. The whomping willow lashed out with powerful limbs, battering the car's dented frame until it ejected the boys and their belongings onto the lawn and disappeared into the forbidden forest, leaving them bruised and shaken under Snape's malevolent glare as he discovered them outside. The Great Hall was so exciting during the feast, but the new teacher was all anyone talked about, not the sorting. Gilderoy Lockhart sat at the staff table, his forget-me-not blue robes matching his eyes, golden hair gleaming under the enchanted ceiling. His first lesson proved disastrous when he released a cage of Cornish pixies that wreaked havoc across the classroom, hanging Neville from a chandelier while Lockhart fled to his office, leaving the students to wrangle the creatures back into their cage. He was bad at things, but his books told grand lies about him being a hero. Detention with Lockhart meant hours of addressing fan mail envelopes, while enduring the professor's endless self-congratulatory anecdotes. As Harry's hand cramped from writing, the candlelight flickered, and suddenly a cold, murderous voice slithered through the wall. Come to me, let me rip you, let me tear you, let me kill you." Harry jumped from his seat, but Lockhart heard nothing, dismissing Harry's pale face as tiredness. The voice continued to haunt Harry in the following weeks, a chilling whisper that no one else could hear, following him through the corridors like an invisible predator. The Halloween party was here, but as kids went to bed, Harry heard the voice. It seemed like it was really, really hungry this time. Following its trail with Ron and Hermione at his heels, they rounded a corner to find the corridor flooded, Mrs. Norris hanging rigid from a torch bracket, her body petrified like a statue. Above her, foot-high words glistened on the wall, painted in what looked horribly like blood. "The chamber of SCCRETS has been OPENED. ENEMIES of the air, beware." The corridor filled with students moments later, their screams echoing through the castle as Filch collapsed in grief and Dumbledore's face grew grave. Something ancient and terrible had awakened within Hogwarts, and Harry couldn't shake the feeling that somehow he was connected to it. The ancient history of Hogwarts spilled from Professor Binns' ghostly lips as he reluctantly abandoned his usual monotone lecture on goblin rebellions. Students sat transfixed as he recounted the tale of the four founders and their eventual schism, how Salazar Slytherin wished to be more selective about students admitted to Hogwarts, believing magical learning should be kept within all magic families. Before departing the school, legend claimed Slytherin built a hidden chamber, sealed until his true heir returned to unleash the horror within. A monster that would purge the school of those Slytherin deemed unworthy to study magic. Though Binns dismissed it as myth, uneasy glances darted between Muggle-born students throughout the classroom. The castle corridors grew colder as autumn deepened, carrying with them a chill that seemed to seep from the very stones. During a particularly dreary Quidditch practice, Harry spotted something small and familiar moving along the edge of the stands, Colin Creevey with his ever-present camera. Harry's annoyance at being photographed in his mud-splattered state evaporated later that night when the same boy was carried into the hospital wing, rigid as board, his camera frozen before his face. The petrified form of Colin confirmed what everyone feared. The Chamber of Secrets was truly open, the heir had returned, and the monster now hunted through Hogwarts halls. Panic rippled through the school like a stone dropped in still water. Students travelled in tight packs, eyeing one another with suspicion. Ginny Weasley appeared particularly distressed by Colin's fate, while Fred and George attempted to lighten the mood by marching ahead of Harry in corridors, shouting, "Make way for the heir of Slytherin." Their antics only intensified the whispers and sideways glances Harry endured. In the shadowy corner of Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, Hermione's cauldron bubbled with the beginnings of Polyjuice Potion, a complex brew that would allow them to transform temporarily into Slytherin students and infiltrate their common room. As the potion simmered, so did their suspicions that Draco Malfoy could be the heir, his family's dark history and his obvious hatred for Muggle-borns marking him as their primary suspect. The trio knew the plan was dangerous and against countless school rules, but with the monster still at large and no one else seeming close to identifying the culprit, they felt they had no choice but to take matters into their own hands. The Great Hall hummed with anticipation as students gathered for the first meeting of the dueling club. Professor Lockhart strutted across the raised platform in his plum-coloured robes, Professor Snape lurking behind him like a dark shadow. When Malfoy and Harry were picked, the room felt prickly. In a flash of movement, Malfoy conjured a serpent that slithered menacingly toward Justin Finch-Fletchley. Without thinking, Harry stepped forward, strange hissing sounds emerging from his throat. The snake froze, docile at his command. The room fell silent, faces turning to him with horror and fear. Harry didn't understand until Ron and Hermione dragged him away, explaining in hushed tones that he had spoken Parseltongue, the rare ability to communicate with snakes, a talent most famously possessed by Salazar Slytherin himself. The whispers followed Harry through the castle corridors in the days that followed. Students scattered at his approach, conversations halting when he entered rooms. He felt like everyone thought he was bad, and he didn't know how to fix it. Desperate to explain himself to Justin, Harry searched the castle until he stumbled upon a horrific scene in a deserted corridor. Justin's petrified body sprawled on the cold stone floor, the ghostly form of nearly headless Nick floating beside him, black and smoky rather than pearly white. The shock of discovery had barely registered when Peeves spotted him, shrieking accusations through the halls. Within moments, Harry stood in the center of a growing crowd, their faces etched with certainty that they had found the culprit, the heir of Slytherin, caught at the scene of his latest attack. Christmas arrived with a blanket of snow and emptier hallways as most students fled home, away from the danger stalking Hogwarts. In Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, steam rose from a cauldron of mud-like potion. Hermione carefully distributed the Polyjuice Potion into 3 glasses, dropping in the stolen hairs with steady hands. The transformation was excruciating, skin bubbling, bones shifting, features rearranging until Harry and Ron wore the faces of Crabbe and Goyle. They navigated the dungeons with unfamiliar bodies, following a Slytherin student through a concealed entrance into a common room of greenish lamps and dark furniture. Malfoy lounged before them with imperial ease, unaware of their deception. Harry's heart pounded against his ribs as they carefully steered the conversation toward the Chamber of Secrets. Despite Malfoy's obvious pleasure in the attacks, his revelation proved crushing. He wasn't the heir, didn't know who was, and only wished he could help them when they were found. Disappointment settled heavily as the potion began to wear off. Harry and Ron fled the Slytherin common room, their best lead evaporated, leaving them no closer to uncovering who controlled the monster now terrorizing Hogwarts. The true heir remained hidden, and the chamber's secrets stayed locked away, while Harry bore the weight of the school's suspicion for crimes he hadn't committed. Water seeped through the ceiling of the second-floor corridor, pooling around Harry's shoes as he followed the trail to its source, Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Inside, the transparent ghost wailed about someone throwing a book through her head and into the toilet. Curiosity piqued, Harry fished out a small, soggy diary. The name T.M. Riddle was barely visible on the cover, dated 50 years earlier. Though its pages were mysteriously blank, something about the diary called to Harry, compelling him to keep it. Late one night in his dormitory, Harry examined the diary again, dabbing it with ink out of curiosity. To his astonishment, the ink vanished into the page, and words emerged in response. Tom Riddle was writing back to him. When Harry asked about the Chamber of Secrets, the diary did more than answer. It pulled him inside its pages, thrusting him into Riddle's memory from 50 years ago. Harry watched as a young, handsome Riddle confronted a younger Hagrid, accusing him of harboring the monster that had killed a girl. Harry witnessed Hagrid protecting a large, hairy creature before teachers arrived. The memory ejected Harry back to his bed, leaving him with the disturbing revelation that Hagrid might have been responsible for opening the chamber the first time. Days later, Harry returned to his dormitory to find his belongings strewn across the floor, his trunk upended, and Riddle's diary gone. The calculated invasion left him uneasy, wondering who would risk so much to steal that specific item. Meanwhile, Hermione disappeared into the library, her mind working furiously on a theory about the monster. Her eyes widened with sudden realization one afternoon, but before she could share her discovery, she too fell victim to the beast, found petrified near the library, a small mirror clutched in her rigid hand. The attacks had escalated beyond blood status. Now even the brightest witch in their year lay frozen in the hospital wing. Fear saturated the castle. Minister Fudge arrived under cover of darkness, his lime-green bowler hat trembling in his hands as he came to arrest Hagrid as a precaution. Dumbledore stood in his office, his usual twinkle replaced by a hard gleam as Lucius Malfoy presented a suspension order signed by all 12 governors. As both men were led away, Hagrid's booming voice echoed a cryptic message intended for Harry and Ron's ears alone. "Follow the spiders." The castle fell eerily silent that night, its headmaster gone, its gamekeeper imprisoned, and its students huddled in fear. Without Dumbledore's protection, Hogwarts seemed more vulnerable than ever, while the true heir continued their work unimpeded. Harry clutched his wand tighter, watching tiny spiders scuttling desperately toward the forbidden forest, leading to answers he wasn't sure he was ready to find. As darkness descended over Hogwarts, Harry and Ron stood at the edge of the forbidden forest, their wands illuminating a trail of spiders scurrying deeper between the ancient trees. Hagrid's final instruction echoed in their minds: "Follow the spiders." With each step into the densening woods, the creatures grew larger, their 8-legged shadows stretching ominously across fallen logs and gnarled roots. The boys' courage wavered when they encountered an ancient Ford Anglia, now feral and moss-covered, but the need for answers pulled them forward until they reached a hollow clearing where moonlight barely penetrated. There waited Aragog, an acromantula of monstrous proportions, his milky blind eyes and massive pincers making Ron tremble uncontrollably. The ancient spider revealed the truth about Hagrid's innocence 50 years ago, and spoke of a creature so terrifying that even the forest's most fearsome predators feared it. "We do not speak its name," Aragog clicked, his massive body tensing at the mere thought of the beast that lurked within Hogwarts' walls. As his words faded, hundreds of his descendants descended from the canopy, forcing Harry and Ron into a desperate flight through the forest, saved only by the timely arrival of the wild Ford Anglia, which carried them to safety before disappearing back into the depths of the woods. The next morning, inspiration struck Harry during a hospital visit to the petrified Hermione. A crumpled piece of paper clutched in her rigid hand contained the vital information they needed. The monster was a basilisk, a giant serpent whose gaze meant death, traveling through the school's plumbing system. The pieces aligned in Harry's mind. Parseltongue, the disembodied voices in the walls, the spiders fleeing, and the petrified victims who had all seen the creature's reflection rather than its direct gaze. A conversation with Moaning Myrtle revealed another stunning truth. She was the girl killed during the chamber's previous opening, her death occurring in the very bathroom where she now haunted. The school fell into an atmosphere of dread when Professor McGonagall's magically amplified voice ordered all students to their dormitories. In the staff room, hidden behind a wardrobe, Harry and Ron overheard the devastating news. A student had been taken into the chamber itself. Their hearts froze when they learned it was Ginny Weasley, and the message on the wall read her skeleton would lie in the chamber forever. Ron's face drained of colour as professors discussed the imminent closure of Hogwarts. With Dumbledore gone and time running out, Harry gripped his wand with newfound determination. The scattered pieces of the puzzle had come together, revealing both the monster and its lair, but the most harrowing challenge still awaited, finding the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets and confronting whatever horrors lay within to save Ginny before it was too late. With wands drawn, Harry and Ron forced the fraudulent Professor Lockhart down the gloomy corridor toward Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. The professor's face had lost its usual confident shine, replaced by a sickly pallor as he shuffled forward under their watchful eyes. In the bathroom, the ghost of Myrtle hovered near her usual toilet, her translucent form casting an eerie glow across the tiled floor. Following her directions to where she had died 50 years ago, Harry approached the sink and noticed a tiny snake etched into one of the copper taps. Something stirred within him, a connection to his unusual gift, and Parseltongue slipped from his lips. The sink began to move, revealing a large pipe wide enough for a man to slide into, the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. The descent into darkness turned treacherous when Lockhart, seizing a moment of distraction, snatched Ron's wand and revealed his true nature. His seemingly perfect smile twisted into something sinister as he confessed to being a fraud who had stolen others' achievements. With a flourish, he aimed the wand to erase their memories, but fate intervened through Ron's broken wand. The spell backfired spectacularly, sending Lockhart flying backward and causing the tunnel's ceiling to collapse. Rocks thundered down, creating an impenetrable barrier that separated Harry from Ron. Through a small gap in the rubble, they exchanged brief words, but the decision was clear. Harry would have to continue alone while Ron cleared a path back. The final stretch of tunnel led Harry to an imposing stone door adorned with serpents. Again calling upon his Parseltongue ability, he commanded it to open, revealing the Chamber of Secrets in all its ancient, terrible splendor. Enormous stone pillars entwined with carved serpents rose to support a ceiling lost in darkness. The chamber stretched before him, its floor slick with water and age. At the far end, between the feet of a towering statue of Salazar Slytherin, lay a small, black-robed figure with flaming red hair. Ginny Weasley lay motionless on the cold floor, her skin pale as marble, her normally vibrant presence extinguished. And standing over her was another figure, tall, black-haired, and strangely blurred at the edges. Tom Riddle watched Harry approach, twirling a wand between his fingers, his presence growing more solid with each passing moment as Ginny's life force ebbed away. The heir of Slytherin had finally revealed himself, and Harry stood alone to face the growing threat. In the cavernous depths of the Chamber of Secrets, Harry Potter's heart hammered against his ribs as he confronted the eerily solid form of Tom Riddle, standing over Ginny's motionless body. The chamber's ancient stones echoed with Riddle's cold laughter as he revealed the terrible truth. He was not merely a memory preserved in a diary, but the teenage incarnation of Lord Voldemort himself. With calculated precision, Riddle explained how he had slowly possessed Ginny through his diary, forcing her to open the chamber and release the Basilisk, all while draining her life force to restore his own physical form. Harry's horror mounted as he realized Ginny's remaining life was measured in minutes, and Riddle's form grew more substantial with each passing moment. A flash of crimson suddenly burst through the gloom. Fawkes, Dumbledore's phoenix, soared into the chamber carrying the tattered Sorting Hat in its talons. Riddle's momentary confusion turned to mockery at Harry's apparent reinforcements. But Harry sensed a power in these gifts he couldn't yet understand. Riddle, now revealing the full scope of his plan, turned to the towering statue of Salazar Slytherin and commanded it in Parseltongue. The stone mouth of the statue began to open, and from its depths emerged the Basilisk, an enormous serpent with poisonous fangs and killing eyes. Harry ran blindly, keeping his gaze fixed on the ground to avoid the creature's deadly stare, the massive serpent pursuing him through the chamber's twisted passages. In desperate need of a weapon, Harry reached for the sorting hat, jamming it onto his head and mentally pleading for help. A heavy object suddenly materialized within the hat, the ruby-encrusted sword of Godric Gryffindor. The weight of it felt right in Harry's hands as he turned to face the oncoming Basilisk. Fawkes swooped toward the great serpent, talons extended, puncturing the creature's lethal yellow eyes and rendering its gaze harmless. With newfound courage, Harry raised the gleaming sword as the blinded serpent lunged. He drove the blade upward with all his strength, piercing the roof of the basilisk's mouth, but not before one of its venomous fangs sank deep into his arm. Pain spread through Harry's body like liquid fire as he staggered back, the broken fang still embedded in his flesh. He could feel the poison coursing through his veins, his vision beginning to blur. Riddle's triumphant laughter echoed in the chamber as Harry collapsed beside Ginny, the venom working quickly toward his heart. Through his fading consciousness, Harry spotted Riddle's diary lying abandoned on the floor. With the last of his strength, he grasped the basilisk fang and plunged it deep into the diary's pages. Ink erupted from the book like blood from a wound, and Riddle's scream of agony pierced the air as his form began to splinter and fracture. The memory of Voldemort disintegrated before Harry's eyes, and in the same moment, Fawkes alighted beside him. Great pearly tears fell from the Phoenix's eyes onto Harry's wound, the legendary healing powers neutralizing the venom and sealing the puncture. As strength returned to his limbs, Harry watched color slowly bloom in Ginny's cheeks. The chamber's terrible silence gave way to Ginny's confused stirrings as the immediate danger passed, leaving behind lingering questions about Voldemort's past and his connection to Harry's future. In the aftermath of the Chamber of Secrets confrontation, Harry knelt beside Ginny as Fawkes continued to shed healing tears over his wound. The Phoenix's magic sealed the puncture completely, leaving only a faint silver scar where the basilisk fang had pierced him. Strength flowed back into Harry's limbs while Ginny stirred to consciousness, her freckled face pale but gradually regaining color. Her eyes widened with horror as fragmented memories of her possession returned, tears streaming down her face as she realized what she had been forced to do. The journey back through the chamber's passages presented new challenges. Professor Lockhart stood blinking vacantly at them, his memory completely obliterated by his backfired charm. Harry helped the disoriented Ginny to her feet while Fawkes fluttered ahead, his golden tail feathers glowing like a beacon in the darkness. The Phoenix guided them upward through the pipe that had brought them down, his magical strength allowing him to bear their weight as they clutched his tail feathers. They emerged into Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, soaked and filthy but alive, with Ron clearing away the last of the fallen rocks to reunite with his sister. In Dumbledore's office, the headmaster's blue eyes shone with pride as Harry recounted the events in the chamber. The ancient wizard explained the profound connection between Harry and Voldemort, how the Dark Lord had inadvertently transferred some of his own powers to Harry the night he tried to kill him as a baby. This transfer explained Harry's ability to speak Parseltongue and his other similarities to Riddle. Dumbledore's gentle wisdom helped Harry understand that choices, not abilities, defined who he truly was, and that pulling Gryffindor's sword from the sorting hat proved his true allegiance. Later, Harry encountered Lucius Malfoy in the corridor, the aristocratic wizard's cold eyes narrowing with barely contained fury at Dumbledore's reinstatement as headmaster. With quick thinking, Harry took off one of his grimy socks, placed the ruined diary inside it, and thrust the bundle into Malfoy's hands. The wizard pulled the diary from the sock with disgust and tossed the sock aside, directly into the waiting hands of Dobby the house elf. Malfoy's face contorted with rage as he realized Harry's clever trick had freed his servant, while Dobby's tennis ball eyes filled with tears of gratitude. The final days of the term passed in a blur of celebration. Madame Pomfrey administered the mandrake restorative draught to the petrified victims, who awoke confused but unharmed. Professor McGonagall announced the cancellation of final exams, causing an eruption of cheers throughout the Great Hall. The booming voice of Hagrid filled the entrance hall during the feast as he returned from his wrongful imprisonment in Azkaban, embracing Harry with enough force to nearly crack his ribs. Laughing voices echoed. Hogwarts was happy again, no more gloom. As Harry packed his trunk for the journey home, he couldn't help but smile at the thought of returning to this magical place in a few short months, grateful for another year survived against the lingering threat of Voldemort.